All right. How y'all doing? Good afternoon. Yeah, last week, if you were here last week, we heard an incredible, powerful message, and we're just the roof blew off of this place from Bobby, right? Wasn't that incredible? Wasn't that powerful? Yeah, and not only that, but today is Bobby's 34th birthday, all right? 34th birthday. So we're celebrating Bobby today, and we're so thankful for that. And then yesterday we had our run for the love of it. It was pretty awesome, pretty good. Anybody run in the run for the love of it? Okay, yeah. And you got a medal, right? You medaled. That's awesome. Yes, it was very, very cold. And I ran, and my fingers just felt like, literally I'm running thinking I'm going to have to amputate my fingers. It was sleeting on us while we were running, but I guess, kept us moving forward, because the only way to get out of the cold was to get back here, right? So that happened. It was great. Some of you are like, I'm not running unless a bear is chasing after me. That's the only way you're going to find me running, or a dog. Right? Dogs will make you run faster when you run away from them. But we raised a lot of money for our mission work, which is incredible. It was awesome, making a big difference. And then also, let's see, Super Bowl was last Sunday night, right? And did you watch the game? The Patriots versus the Rams. And of course, it was no surprise that the Patriots won this one. And the Rams fans, I don't think they received that very well. They didn't respond very well, because I think they got a little mad. I was actually driving home from a Super Bowl party in this little car, our little, red car, and Pam was in the passenger seat, and we're driving down 150, and all of a sudden, just, it was dark outside, lights were on, we were driving, and this car just pulled out, like from the Dollar General over there on 150, and it's a truck. It was a Dodge Ram 1500. It was a Ram. And so I assumed it was probably a Rams fan that was upset and tried to ram us off the road. Literally, we went onto the shoulder of the road, and the guy just kept coming, and I was flooring it, trying to run away from the Ram. The Ram was coming after me, and Pam was saying, that guy's trying to run us over, like he's trying to kill us. I said, well, get out your phone, get 911 ready, because I couldn't get away from him. And I was watching the red light and the green light there in front, and I was thinking, I'm going to have to run this light if no matter what, I can't stop, because he's coming after me. And there were cars in front of us that were not aware of this situation. They were going slow, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And the last minute, he swerved into the suicide lane, and drove on past us. But even still, we were like, we're going home a different way, because we didn't want him to find us. It was a narrow escape. And today we're actually starting this new series we're calling Escape Room. You have these cards there in your seat, escape room cards, and we use these to invite some other people. And so it's been fun today getting to meet some people who are here for the very first time, and we want to welcome you here with us. Some of you had been invited, and we are inviters. Okay, so Exodus is actually the story of a great escape of God's people out of Egyptian bondage into freedom in the promised land. And you follow this story through Exodus. That's what we're going to be doing. And you may wonder, as we're walking through the Bible, well, how did all of God's people get enslaved in Egypt? Remember last week we talked about how Joseph, how he rose in power in Pharaoh's power, in Pharaoh's palace. And so what happened was Joseph ended up in bringing all of God's people there into Egypt. And God was blessing them there, so much so that they were perceived as a threat. And so the Egyptians enslaved all of the Israelites, or they're also called the Hebrews, and they were enslaved, and they just kept putting more and more demands on them, more and more work on them. But the more that they forced labor, that they put on them, the more God blessed them, and the more they began to grow and grow. And so Pharaoh was afraid of how much power they were getting. And so basically he came up with this plan in Exodus 1:22. And it says this: Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. So it was infanticide. They were killing all these babies. It was a tragic, terrible, heartbreaking situation, and as God's people, we stand for all life, okay, and the value and the sanctity of life. We have to stand for those who can't stand for themselves. But in the middle of this situation, we meet Moses, the greatest leader of all time. And I'm talking about the Big Mo, who actually himself was a great escape artist. He was an escape artist from birth, because at this time he's just a little baby. And what happens here is because there's this order to kill all these male babies, Moses' mother, Jochebed, she comes up with a plan to save Moses' life. And this is his first escape. And we see this in Exodus 2:3. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it out among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Now, a few weeks ago, we talked about how Noah built this big ark that protected him and his family through the flood. And this same word that was used for that ark is actually used for this little ark that Moses' mother made for him. And so she put him in this little ark, and there, it's like an obvious throwback in the story to say, here's how God was going to deliver and save his people. And so she put him in this little basket, and she sealed it up with the tar and the pitch, just like with the big ark. They did that. And then places this basket in the Nile River. And who found him but Pharaoh's daughter, who brought him to grow up and live in Pharaoh's palace. And so he grew up there among the Egyptians in Pharaoh's palace. And then when he was 40 years old, he sees this Egyptian slave master who is being very harsh and just beating one of the Hebrew men. And so Moses, he just, gets this rage comes over him, and he kills this Egyptian slave master and buries the body, and he thinks he got away with it, right? He thinks he got away with it. It turns out he didn't. He didn't get away with it. Look at Exodus 2:14. It says, when Pharaoh heard what Moses had done, he tried to kill him. But Moses, what did Moses do? He ran away. Moses ran away from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian, and there he sat down near a well. So Moses did what he does best. He ran away. And sometimes we think that whatever we've done, it's secret, and we're gonna hide it, and nobody's gonna know. But it turns out that we're not really that good at hiding things. We think we are, but the principle here is basically this: that what we cover up, God uncovers, and what we willingly uncover, God covers up. So, we try to hide those things, those hurts in our life, and we try to hide those failures in our life, but make no mistake about it, what is done in the dark comes out in the light. But if we willingly will be honest enough and open enough to uncover our sin and our failures, we uncover it, then God's grace is sufficient, and God's grace and mercy and forgiveness covers over our failure and covers over our sin. But Moses, he was on the run. He was the original Houdini, running away from his problems. He escaped when he was just a baby in a basket, and now he escapes by running away from Pharaoh for the second time. Moses wasn't just lucky. Moses knew how to run. Moses was a runner. And you know, it was just kind of in his blood. Moses was raised to run. But how many of you know today that God didn't raise you to run? Touch somebody on the shoulder. Tell them, God didn't raise you to run. Come on, tell somebody. God didn't raise you to run. There you go. There you go. Let me tell you, today we know that it's easy for us sometimes when we're ashamed, when we're afraid, when we're embarrassed, it's easy to run away. It's easy to run away and think we can hide. And it turns out you can only escape the past when you accept it, not avoid it. You can only escape the past when you accept it and not avoid it. If you want to escape your fears, it takes you facing your fears, because you can't outrun your past. Your past has a nasty way of always catching up with you. So what do you have to do? You got to stop running. You got to stop running away. In fact, you think about that problem that you're trying to escape from. You're trying to get away from it. And the further you run away from your problem, the further you're running away from your solution. The further you're running away from your answer. And so after 40 years in the palace, and then, check this out, 40 more years in the wilderness. Moses is 80 years old by now. And I mean, this is just the part of the story that starts the story. We're about to get to the really good stuff. But he's 80 years old, and he's out in the wilderness watching his father-in-law's flocks at a place called Mount Horeb, which is also happens to be the place where many years later, God is going to give him the 10 Commandments. So this is a special place, an important place that he's at. And while he's out there watching his flocks, he sees this little bush over there that is on fire, and which is really strange. Like, what? Who set the fire? Why is there a fire there in that one bush? But it was really strange because the fire was burning, but the bush wasn't burning up. It just kept burning and burning and burning. And so Moses is like, that's not the way fire works. Something's weird about this. So he goes over to check it out for himself. And as he gets a little closer to the bush, he hears this voice from within the bush, which is also very weird, right? And the voice says, Moses, Moses. And so God is now speaking to Moses. God has gotten Moses' attention, and he's telling Moses, stop running. Take off your running shoes. Check this out in Exodus 3:5. God says, do not come any closer. Stop. Where you are, stop. In the name of love. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. How's that? God said, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Take off your running shoes, because this is a special place. Why does God tell Moses to take off his shoes? Because he says that he is holy. And we need to remember, and Moses needed to recognize who God is, that God is awesome, that God is holy, and we need to not forget that. The Bible says, be still and know that I am God, and we need to know that he is God and that he is holy. But it was also holy ground because that was a special place. That was the place where God got Moses' attention, and where God changed Moses' direction, and the trajectory of his life went in a whole new place. And God called Moses to something greater. I mean, it just makes me think, I was just imagining like what if Moses had kept running and he had missed out on God's great purpose for his life, and he just spent the rest of his life in the wilderness? not only would he have missed out, but all of the people that God had called him to deliver would have missed out. They would have remained in bondage. And all of those people that Moses was able to affect for generations and generations, and yes, even us today, because Moses stopped running. And for many of us here in this room today, you are standing on holy ground. Not because this place is anything special. Like if we were to be really honest about where we're at in this place, this is an old shrimp farm. That's why this place was built. It had these big vats in the floor, and they raised indoor shrimp for people to eat in this place. And yet, at the same time, this is so much more than an old shrimp farm, because this is the place that God brought you to get your attention. And God brought you to change the trajectory and the direction of your life in this place, in this very room. And God woke you up and said, I've got something better for you. I've got something greater for you. For many of you, that's the situation. But for some of you, even today, that's why God brought you here. Because he says, this is holy ground. Because God's presence is here. And God has a purpose for your life. But I believe also there's another reason that God said to Moses, take off your sandals. Because, Moses is out there in the desert, on that hot desert sand. And it is hard to run in the desert when you don't have your shoes on. Right? And so God is saying, it's time, Moses, to stop running. Moses had been running for so long, trying to get away, trying to escape from the failures of his past. And he had been running because he identified himself as a murderer. And he saw himself. Did you know Moses had some other problems too? He was a very reluctant leader. And in fact, in this passage here, we find out that Moses was a stutterer, which, is a thing that I don't know, maybe it has to do with your confidence. And I'm not talking about self-confidence, because self-confidence is just that. It's focused on self. But I'm talking about Godfidence, which is placed in God, that God has a purpose for your words and what you say, and that God's able to use your mouth to make a difference, right? And so, but this is how Moses saw himself. He didn't know who he was. He saw himself, he was trapped between two cultures. Am I an Egyptian? Am I a Hebrew? And so he just had a very poor view of who he was and who God had made him. So what was he doing? He was running away. But here's what he found out. No matter how far you run away from God, you cannot run so far that God cannot find you. You can't outrun God. You can't outrun God's purpose and his plan for your life. Psalm 139:7, I love it. It says, where can I go to get away from your spirit? Where can I run from you? And there's the question, but the answer is, there's nowhere. There's nowhere to run. You can't get away from God, and no matter how hard you try, because sometimes we're running, and some of us today, we're running away from God, if we're honest. We're running away from the problems of our past, and our past doesn't just haunt us, but for some of us, our past has imprisoned us. We feel like we're trapped, and we can't get away from our past. And here's what we need to know. You can't escape your past until you face your past. You can't escape it till you're willing to face it. So when Moses finally stops running, God says, okay, now I want you to go back to the very place that you were running away from. I want you to go back to the very people and the very person that you were running away from. And in Exodus 3:10, God says, so now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, he asked this question, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. Who am I? And he didn't know who he was. And God said, I'm gonna be with you. I'm going to be with you through this. And he was supposed to go back to Pharaoh. He was supposed to go back and face his past and free his people. And God says, I'm going to be there with you. But here we find these two clues to how Moses was able to escape and break free from his past. And I think these two clues are so important for us today. The first question that Moses asks is, he asks, who am I? Who am I? No wonder Moses struggles with who he is, because he's been trying to get away from who he is for his whole life. But the second question that Moses asks is, who are you? Who is God? Who are you, God? The two most important questions that unlock the key for you to escape into God's future for you, these two most important questions in life are who am I? And who is God? Who are you, God? Because so often when we try to figure out who we are, you know how we do it? We look to the people around us. We look to our culture. And we look to people and ask them to tell us who we are. You know the problem with that? They don't even know who they are. How are they going to be able to tell you who you are until they figure out who they are? And the fact is, you're not who other people say you are. You're not who you say you are. You are who God says you are. That's who you are. And God made you. And God is the one who knows you best. So he's the one who gets to say. So you're trying to find your identity. You find your identity in who God says he created you to be. But then here's what Moses said. He said in verse 13, suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I say? What shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you're to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. God says, you want to know my name? He says, I am. I am the answer to your question. I am enough. I am sufficient for any problem that you may have in your life, any need in your life, whatever you need today in your life. God says, I am. God is enough. And God is sufficient for all of your yesterdays and all of your todays and all of your tomorrows. Whatever place you find yourself in life, know that he is. That he says, I am. Whatever you need right now, God says, I am. And then Moses asked God one more question. He asked him, what if? You know the what ifs in life? That our fears, we're afraid of, well, what if this happens? What if they say this? And those what ifs keep us from fully trusting in God. And so in Exodus 4, verse 1, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, actually the Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? What is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Then the Lord said to him, throw it on the ground. And Moses threw it on the ground, and he obeyed God. He gave what he had to God, and it became a snake. And what did Moses do? He ran from it. He ran away. Moses did what he does best, right? Once again, Moses ran away. I'm not saying that wasn't a smart move. I mean, it was a snake, right? And so Moses ran away, and so the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. Taking it by the tail, I mean, that's if I was going to pick up a snake, which I'm not, but if I was, I don't think the tail is the place that, so that required a great amount of faith and trust, right? And so So this, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Moses asks, what if? And God asks, what's in your hand? See, Moses didn't see himself as God saw him, and he didn't think that he had what it took. So God gave him a clue. He said, what do you got in your hand? I've already prepared you, Moses. I've already given you everything that you need. The clues are obvious. We went into that escape room, as a staff, and we found out that the clues were all around us. We just had to see them. We had to see them. And to Moses, it was just a staff. It was just a stick. But when he gave it to God, it became something more. It became the rod of God that God would use in Moses' hands to change the heart of a Pharaoh and to set his people free. Moses looked at that stick and he thought it was pointless. But God said, no, it's powerful. I've got a purpose for that. And if you want a clue in your own life about how does God want to use your life to make a difference, then you need to look and ask, what has God already given me? What's already in my hand? The best way to fulfill what God has placed in your heart is to look at what God has placed in your hand. What has He placed? What has He already given you? And He wants to use those when we give that to Him. When we give it back to Him, I remember back when I was a teenager and I was trying to hammer out the guitar, trying to figure it out. And I remember that moment in my room where I prayed and I said, God, if you will give me this ability and you will help me to learn to play this thing, I will use that to tell people about you, to tell people about your plan and your love. I will use that to lift up your name in worship. Now, He didn't give me some magical Eddie Van Halen, ability, but He gave me what I needed to do what He called me to do. And I'm going to ask our band to come out right now. Well, when our staff together went to that escape room a couple weeks ago, one of the things they did, they had this guy that came into the room to begin with to kind of set us up and tell us, some things about what we were supposed to be doing. But we didn't find out everything. But then every once in a while along the way, we got to ask a question to this disembodied voice that was actually watching us from somewhere else. And we'd ask a question and we'd hear the answer. And if you want to know how to escape from your past, you're going to have to ask the right people the right questions, and you're going to have to ask God, who sees your situation, and He knows the answers. You ask Him, and He begins to reveal those answers. Moses had a lot of questions, and he asked God, what if? And he just kept asking questions, and God never said, stop asking the questions. He said, I will give you the answers that you need. When you come to me, when you stop running. You see, ultimately, Moses escapes his past by accepting God's purpose. Okay? He escapes his past by accepting God's purpose for his future. And for some of us, we're really good at running. And we've run so far away from God. And today is the day that God is trying to get your attention. And He's saying, stop running away. Stop running away. Today's the day to come back home. And I remember this story, my favorite story in the Bible, in Luke 15, that Jesus tells this story. And it's all about a runaway. It's all about this son who came to his father and he said, Dad, I want what's coming to me. Give me my inheritance right now. And basically what he was saying to his dad was, he's saying, you're dead to me. I'm going to go live my life apart from you and do my own thing. And he took all that he had been given and he just blew it and he wasted. Party always comes to an end, right? You enjoy it while it lasts, but the party ultimately comes to an end. And he came to the end of himself. He came to the end of his rope. And when he finally hit rock bottom, he said, I got to go home. I got to go home and face my dad. I got to go home and see my dad again. And so he gets up and he starts that long journey home. And on his way home, he's rehearsing this speech in his mind that he goes over and over again. Have you ever done that where you're just like, okay, here's what I'm going to say, and here's how this is going to go. And so he's rehearsing this, and he says, Father, in his head, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And so he just over and over, I'm not worthy. I'm no longer worthy. I am unworthy. Well, he didn't realize this, but as he's getting closer to the house while he's still a long way off, his father is on the porch. And his father is standing there like he'd done day after day after day. His dad was standing there watching down the road, longing, hoping, praying, just waiting for that moment when he could see his son off in the distance. And he saw his boy off in the distance coming, making that walk home. And so the father, he took his robe and he tucked it into his belt. Very undignified, he's like, I got to go see my boy. And he gets up and he just starts running, and he's running down the road as fast as he can. He's running for his boy. And when he gets to his son doesn't even get to say anything. His son doesn't get to say that well-rehearsed speech. Instead, the dad just throws his arms around his son and says, my boy is home. Here's my boy. I love you. Welcome home. That dad is your heavenly Father, and he's watching and he's waiting for his lost son and his lost daughter to come home to him today. You may have your speech, you may say, I am unworthy, but God says, I am sufficient. I am enough for your every need, and I am your Father, and I love you. Welcome home. That's what God is saying to you today. You say, well, what do I do? What do I do? I love this. In Psalm 31:1, it says, I run to you, God. I run for dear life. Don't let me down. It's time today to come home running into the arms of a Father who is watching for you, who is waiting for you, who loves you more than you can ever know. And God says, stop running. I have a purpose and a plan for your life. And today is the day that you are standing on holy ground because God is here. He is present in this place. And let's talk to him right now. Heavenly Father, God, in this place right now, God, we thank you that whatever concerns us, whatever worries, whatever fears we have today, God, you are I am. You are I am. You are enough for our every need, God, and you love us, God, and you calling us. You're saying, stop running away from me. It's time to come home. It's time to receive that great call and that great purpose and plan that he has for your life today. If that's you and you say, I'm receiving God's purpose and plan for my life, would you just lift your hand in the air? Say, God, I'm tired of running. Today's the day. I'm coming home to you today. Thank you for throwing your arms of love around me and for receiving me today. In Jesus' name. Now we all sing this together.